Good evening and welcome to another edition of What's Happening. I'm Elliot Margolis. I'm here with my co-host Gail Burke. And our guest tonight is Attorney Stewart Gardner. You've seen him before on the show, but not on this topic. This topic is a little more, I find it very controversial. We're talking about Family Probate Court tonight. And I've got friends who have been through probate court, the family probate. And it's pretty scary what goes on. At least in my view, it's pretty scary what goes on. It seems to me that the mother gets everything and the father, I suppose I could say it on cable TV, but you know what I mean with the screwdriver. Yeah, you
Sure.
know. It seems to me that the laws are geared towards the mother. I've got a few testimonials from people that have gone through it that I'd like to read to you, Stewart, and see what your reaction is to these and to the court. According to the son, who was at the time in his teens. So if he's in his teens, you know that he's got some intelligence. He can speak for himself. He's not a 4 or 5 year old kid. His mother told him he wasn't a good person. His mother said that, or he said that his mother was at times violent. Would not allow him to dream. In other words, you know, gee, I'd like to do this, I'd like to do that, and, you know, work towards that goal. Wouldn't let him have friends in the house. Couldn't go outside to explore. Was not allowed to walk to school. Now he was at the time in middle school, was not allowed to walk to school, which was a half a mile from his house, because I guess, you know, he'd bump into friends and talk or things like that. His mother said that he wasn't capable of doing things, that he was somewhat mentally disabled. Not true, by the way, but that's what she would do. The father had him 2 hours on Tuesdays, 2 hours on Thursdays, and a few hours on Saturdays. One day, he left his house to visit his father. His mother went to court because of that. The court said he couldn't do it. He went and did it again and got locked out of his house. The judge in court, again, we're talking about a teenager, in court, the judge would not allow the kid to speak. Okay? Didn't want to know what the kid had to say. The kid would talk to the probate officer, and the probate officer apparently could talk to the judge, but nothing happened. The mother wouldn't work, so she was living off of her welfare and child support. So the kid was her sole income, okay? But once he turned 18, and the mother was still getting checks, and he was now 18, he could live with his father, the checks belonged to the kid, not to the mother. It's for the kid's money. But the mother wouldn't give him the money. He went to the house one time to collect with the police. The mother wouldn't open the door. But the mother was allowed to get away with this. And when you go to court, the court doesn't want to hear anything. Wouldn't listen to the kid, and apparently what the father had to say was totally irrelevant. Is that what the court is now? And I will say in both cases that I can talk about, both judges are women. Whether that has anything to do with it or not, I have no idea. But how do you react to a situation like that?
Well, Elliot, I can't, it's difficult for me to respond to those allegations because sometimes what I think when stories are told and whatnot, sometimes facts are sometimes omitted. In other words, you say that the son wasn't allowed to talk, but maybe he was given a chance the first 3 times and didn't really say something relevant or whatnot. But even leaving that aside, I think there are plenty of cases out there where it's inequitable. The court is inequitable. Benefits the mother more than the father. I think we live in a system right now where still the mother's most of the time the one that's raising the children. Most of the time, if she does have a career, she gives up her career to raise the children. And if there is a split up, most of the time the mother will have, they'll both have there's 2 types of custody. There's the financial type of custody and the physical custody. They'll sort of split the decision making, but the mother will have most of the physical custody, have the child or the children most of the time. So. Yeah, I think you'll find cases, like even assuming all these facts are true, you're going to find egregious cases out there because we defer to the mother as a society. I think that's not so much a probate court question, I think it's a societal question. And I think for every one mother you tell me that is a delinquent mother, I will give you 100 delinquent fathers. I will give you fathers that don't want to pay $20 a week for their kids. I will give you fathers that abuse their kids. I will give you mothers that got restraining orders against their kids. I will give you 100 to 1, and I will guarantee you that. And that's my answer to that story. As much as that might be true, there's 100 other stories of some woman who, and again, there is joint responsibility in our society for children. A father and mother of a kid, we always yell at the mother. The mother's the one that has to, or the mother's the one that can't get the abortion. The mother's the one that can't do this, or the mother's the one that leaves the child. Where is the father in this case? Where is the man that committed to this child, that bore this child too? Because he's off somewhere, we can't blame him, or he's working, or he's doing something. He's out of the picture. So I feel like if our society is designed, and if the courts are designed to protect the mother, I support that simply because of the numbers.
But each case is an individual case and should be treated as an individual case. Now here's a case where the kid wanted to be with the father, but the judge wouldn't listen.
So I can't speak to that one. And there are egregious cases. There are cases where there's definitely abuse of power. There's definitely, a judge doesn't, I don't know about this one, but I'm sure there are cases where a judge feels like he or she knows the best interests of that family more than the family does, which I think is wrong. Don't get me wrong. But these judges here, I was thinking about probate court. It's not a happy place. It's the court where families go to split up, and they're either going to spend a lot of time administratively, spend a lot of money, fight. It's not going to be, it's not like, with like a house closing where everyone's happy and someone's sold a house and made a lot of money and someone's buying a new house and they're starting their new life. This is it's almost like a court of misery. Everyone, when everyone talks about divorces or this stuff, everyone's got a horror story about it. I don't know if there is a right way to do it. And, as I said, I'm sure there are egregious examples that are perfectly true where you go, this judge abused the power. I guess you hope that in the majority it doesn't happen that way.
Well, would you agree that maybe the courts have too much power over the probate court? I'm looking at it from the standpoint of the elder abuse. And there have been numerous cases, particularly in Massachusetts, about the abuse of the courts as far as the elderly are concerned.
Give me some examples. What do you say elder abuse by the courts?
Okay. Here's an example in here. This is the Boston Broadside. I don't know how many of you read this, but this is a case where the elderly person was put into a nursing home against her will. The courts took over. There was guardianship involved. But the problem was that the probate court pretends to be a court, but they've taken over the power of the family or anybody else. And once you go to probate in a case where it's a case of dementia or whatever it happens to be,
sure,
they have complete power.
Sure. It's a good argument for estate planning. Because you can,
it is.
Because you can do it through the private market.
But think about this. It happened, there was a case a couple of years ago where the girl was from Connecticut. She was put into the hospital. She had, I think it was MS, or she had some chronic disease. And they were helping her. And at one point, the doctor that she had moved over to Children's Hospital. The courts gave the hospitals the power to transfer this young girl over to
the doctor.
Children's
Yeah.
Hospital. As it turned out, her health started to deteriorate. The parents wanted to take her out of there. They were not allowed to do that. The courts had total control over this girl in her incapacitation. They kept her there experimenting on her at Children's Hospital for over a year, wouldn't even allow the parents to go in and see her.
Yeah.
They finally were able to, through the media and other resources, they were able to take their daughter back. A year they weren't allowed to
So
even see
I'm not.
her.
Let me give a caveat here. I'm not a big fan of what you're talking about is guardianship and conservatorship.
Yeah.
Guardianship is over the person. Conservatorship is over their money. So if it's elderly or a young person, and guardianship happens couple ways. One is if someone has to go with their parent and their parent is insane or lost their faculties, and they say, look, they're not responsible for themselves anymore. With children, I'm assuming it's the same type of thing. It's either they're non-compos mentis. There's mental issues.
Well, they said that the parents weren't capable of taking care
here's the
of her,
thing.
or making
Usually,
decisions
the way
for
the
her.
system is supposed to work, and again, I can't speak to this case, and I can't speak to your particular. The way the system is supposed to work is there must be egregious negligence. In other words, there has to be significant negligence on the part of the parents. And I don't know about this case, but there are tons of
wasn't.
cases. I mean, you see them in the paper. They tie up their kids. They beat their kids. They don't feed their kids. They let their kids urinate on themselves. Do you want those kids staying in the house? Now, maybe not
course
this
not.
one. Maybe not
Of
this
course
one.
not.
But so what happens is some authority, and I don't. It's the probate court's authority. Some authority has to come in there and say these parents are physically and mentally abusing their children. We can't let this happen. Now, I agree there can be overreach, right? But let me ask you this: would you rather have a court that has the power to overreach? In other words, let's say in our society, just for numbers, there's 100 bad parents out there, right? And would you rather have the court overreach and take 120, right, by mistake, or would you rather have them underreach and take 40?
I don't think the courts should have that kind of power. Okay,
Who's going to come in?
don't.
Who's going to come in and help these people? I mean, this is one of the things I don't want to deal with it. But these are the kids that are on the streets sometimes, and these are the kids that are committing crimes sometimes. And I think it's a bigger price we pay as a society if we don't come in and help them. If we're not proactive, and we don't get a guardianship, and we don't. I don't like doing experiment on people. So if that's what happened, that's wrong. But if we don't come in there and get guardianship, and the court doesn't come in, these are the kids that are on the streets that are committing crimes and violence and dying from drug addiction. And I think that's a bigger, certainly a bigger monetary cost. It costs us 10 times as much.
Well, are you more concerned with the cost of it, or the fact that maybe, just maybe, the courts are wrong? Maybe they're not listening to because they have the power.
Well, the lack of
and they
listening
abuse it.
is part of the problem. Let me go into
Please,
this
give me another
other one. Okay, and this is the father telling me that it seems that the court does, for the court to listen to the offenses by the woman, they appear they must be either in the realm of beating, sexual, or drug-related. Otherwise, the court doesn't want to hear them. And this is from
Say that again,
personal.
that they court-
If the offense of the woman is not
against the man.
against the man.
Okay.
Yeah, they don't want to hear it.
Unless it's some sort of physical violence.
Right. Now, in this case, this person has several documentations of mental abuse on the kids,
This is the mother against the kids.
the mother against the kids,
Okay.
that will never be heard or evaluated.
Yeah.
Parental alienation is not admissible in Massachusetts courts, according to him. The court listens to the woman and not the father. The kids suffer long-range effects. The kids are not allowed to talk. The father has to pay $1,600 a month for aid for child support,
Sure.
but the mother makes $80,000 a year. And what's interesting about that is the $19,000 that she's getting from the husband
Yeah.
is non-taxable income,
child
and yet he has to pay tax on his income
Yeah.
on that $19,000. So it brings me to a couple of conclusions.
Go ahead.
Okay, you're going to love this. Okay, I'm going to get away a little bit.
You think I'm going to protect
No,
you?
a couple of things. Number one, they have to be in court, say, at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
And their case may not be heard till 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Hopefully you get it sooner, but yeah.
Okay? So the problem there is you got to pay the lawyer $200, $300, $400 an hour for the amount of time that the lawyer is there.
Yes.
Not fair to the person.
Yes.
Okay? That's number one. And number two is, why is it that if this system is so archaic and it's created by lawyers, for lawyers, the lawyers are going to make money? Is that the reason why they don't want to change the system? Because all your legislating, a high percentage of legislators are litigators. So there's a conflict of interest there. And it just seems to me that if you know that the system is bad and you don't want to fix it, where are we going to go?
So it's a bigger problem. I think a lot of the systems in our society are broken. You're just picking out one. I mean, the court, if anything, in the hierarchy of systems that are broken in this country, I think that courts are down low, in my opinion. I think you
have a lawyer.
So here's the thing. I'm in court a lot, not a terrible amount, but I'm a couple times a month maybe. And judges seem pretty prudent to me. I sit there, and how you said you go there at 8 o'clock, and sometimes you're not going to 4. So what happens is there's a string of cases that are heard first, and you wait for your case to be called. And so if you're bored or you're not reading something, you listen to the judge talk to these other people. I hear judges be more than fair with people. I hear judges be more than fair. I've been to criminal court where they bring in the perps and all the people that are arrested, and I hear them say, look, you've got all these rights, and we're going to assign you a lawyer, and we're going to let you go, and then you got to come back in a couple of weeks. I've heard people say, my lawyer didn't show up. Can I come back again? I've heard them say that. I've heard these incredibly fair things from judges. So when you say to me, this system's broken, I say, maybe it is, but I don't think it's any more broken than any other system. I think the system isn't so much broken as it's run by imperfect beings. We're all trying to figure out the right way to navigate this thing, and sometimes I don't think the judge would want to be there either. Who wants to sit and listen to people complain for?
That's their job.
You guys think
no one forces them to take that job.
Well, some of it you do because you love it and you love the people, and some of it you do for the money, and some of it you do for the prestige and all that kind of stuff. But there's diminishing marginal returns there. After 6 or 8 or 15, I don't care what you pay me.
Yeah,
it doesn't make a
the
difference.
problem is, Stewart, that the most vulnerable people are at risk here. You have children on the one end, and you have the elderly on the other end. I
agree.
And they're at the mercy of either bad lawyers, which there are bad lawyers,
I agree with that.
or bad judges.
I agree with that.
And sometimes there's a lack of money to pay for the best. So you come before these probate judges, and you're not allowed to speak, or you're not.
Who said you're not allowed to speak?
Just a minute. Or you're not allowed to do what has to be done, and the judge listens to certain things, and he makes the decision. He or she makes a decision that's going to affect the lives of these people. And in many cases, and particularly in Massachusetts, in many cases, it turns out that either the elderly, lots of times they're transported because the case of dementia, whether it's real or not, is put on the person. They're transferred without their agreement because of the laws, put into a nursing home, and they may be treated well, they may not be treated well. But it's all up to the courts as to what happens to these people. They lose their rights. Well, and that's not the way it should be.
I actually agree. I mean, I think as a society we ignore our youth and we isolate our elderly. But I want to say that the way the system is supposed to work is that, an elder person is supposed to have people around him or her that can assist, that can say, okay, mom or dad, I see that you're losing your faculties. I'm here to help. And if I have to go to court, I'm going to get the guardianship, and I'm going to make sure your bills are paid. And, worst comes to worst, if I have to put you in a nursing home, we've talked on the previous shows about the prices of nursing home, but I'm going to do something like that. I think when it breaks down is when there's no individual to take responsibility for this elder person. And I think what
Well-
you're saying is not a probate judge; it's a money thing. If you guys don't want to pay taxes, throw another 4% of taxes and say this money's going to go just to help people over 75 with dementia. You'll have lots of places opening up to help these people.
But there are many cases where it's not a matter of not wanting to do it, but it's a matter of maybe the people in charge don't know what to do, so they turn to the lawyer or they turn to the courts, and this is what they're given, and then they lose control. They lose the control so that the courts are allowed to do whatever they want, and there's no compensation, there's no way to get away from it. Once you're involved with it, it's very difficult to get away from it.
So I certainly agree that again, my personal practice, when I sit with anyone, I always advise them to do it outside of the court system, to set up a system to healthcare proxy or set up a
Right.
power of attorney so that I can, you can go into a bank and sign documents. You don't need something from the court.
Right.
So yes, I agree that once the court has a hold of, once you ask the court for the guardianship or the conservatorship, there are accountings you need to do, and there are people involved, and I agree that the accountings and all the different advice that you have to give to the court, who's the person that's making the decision when you give them the paperwork. I agree with that. But I think in theory what it's supposed to do is protect the individual that's being that can't protect themselves.
But the theory isn't working. So what do you do?
So when you said that the court's in charge. No, it's a person that gets in charge. Unless the
judge.
court thinks it's the guardian that's in charge. The judge is just the gatekeeper to make sure that the guardian is doing what the guardian's supposed to be doing. If my father becomes mentally ill and I got to put him and I got to become guardianship over him, I'm the one charged with the responsibilities to take care of him. The court
But
just wants to make sure.
the judge has control of the guardianship.
Only if I screw up. I mean, I have control of the guardianship. I'm confused about where you guys. I get these stories, but every time I'm in court, the judge looks at the individual and says, "Do this." And if the individual's not doing it, then the court gets involved.
Okay, but when you say that the court is supposed to be help the responsible people to.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so why is it then that the court appears to favor the woman over the guy, won't listen to the kid? What does the kid want? Do you think a 15-year-old knows what might be better for him?
My 15-year-old knows everything, so yes.
I heard that about you when you were 15
My
too.
15-year-old knows everything, so that's yeah.
But you know what I'm saying. Why doesn't the court at least want to hear from the kids?
So in the cases that I've been involved with, I've seen 9-year-olds testify. So it would be disconcerting to me if it was true that the 15-year-old was never allowed to speak and never allowed to speak about the father.
But is
These are
that
two cases.
depending on who the judge is?
Yeah, it depends on the judge and the case history. I mean, what you guys are saying, at least what I'm hearing, is you're saying there's abuse of process. There's people that know how to work the system,
Yeah.
especially good lawyers.
Right.
And I can't disagree. I was actually talking with George about this before. It's true. You make the system. People got to want to follow the system, and it's got to be it's got to compensate those that follow the rules, and it's got to be fair. And I think in general, I think the system isn't what the problem is. Part of it is it's just run by an imperfect people.
I was talking to a psychiatrist who deals with family probate court, and he said to me, it's the most archaic, unfair, ridiculous system he's ever seen in his life.
Now, is he talking about Massachusetts?
Yeah, oh yeah, because he worked in the North Shore area, and now he's out in a different county, but still seeing and observing and consulting, and he says it's a mess.
I think another issue when you deal, again, what we talked about at the beginning of the show, with probate and family court, you're dealing with misery. You're dealing with the people that were in love, that committed each other for their lifetimes. They had 3 children. Everything was great, and then something fell apart. The woman cheated on the man cheated on the woman. Who knows? But then the question is, do they act like adults and separate, and figure out the best thing to do, or do they just fight? And I think when they just fight, the system just lets them do that. And they can pay lawyers, and they can fight, and they can ruin each other's lives and whatnot. But I don't. There's no. You don't want authority to stop them, right? Who's gonna? You can't tell people to stop feeling the way they want to feel. I don't know how to answer that question other than to say it's a court of misery. It's a court where people are getting divorced, or some kid's in there with an abusive parent who wants to be emancipated, or someone died and the two brothers are fighting over the house because the mom liked one brother more, or something like that. It's not a happy time.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a right way to do it.
Well, I think one of the problems I see with it is perhaps that the courts have just too much power.
Yeah.
Really and truly. And I think it ought to be easier for people to get through things like that, because a lot of them have no idea about the law.
Yeah.
Sometimes they end up with a lawyer who's, may not have their best interests at heart.
Sure.
I'm not sure how you go about preventing that, but I would think that there must be ways for people that have these kinds of problems to get good advice that will allow them to get through, whether it's children or divorce or whether it's the elderly, without giving the courts so much power that families become very frustrated.
Let me ask you this. You seem to think that the court, about the elderly stuff.
Yeah.
If there's an elder person with no relatives and they have no money left, or the Social Security doesn't cover their bills, and they're 250 pounds overweight, and they have heart condition, and now they can't mentally control themselves, and they have all these issues. Don't you need some authority to have all the power over them? Don't you want to be able to say, this person is a disaster, and I feel terrible for them, but we've got to do, and there's another question is there quality services? But let's say, don't you want a judge to have plenary power over that person, to be able to put them in a home and save
Well,
them?
that's the worst case scenario I've ever heard.
Well, I'm just,
I mean,
so you said that the court has too much power. Don't you want that power to be used then?
used but not abused.
I just want to
There
get
should
back
be
to...
somebody watching over, somebody who watches over these judges and not just give them total power
I
over what
agree.
happens.
I agree.
That
I just
would be
want to
my
get back to
scenario.
one thing, because we're running low
We're
on
running
time.
out of time.
Back to the kid who
But
testified.
when I talked about the fact that you got to be at court at 8 o'clock, but your case may not be heard till 4 o'clock,
Right.
and you're paying the lawyer X number of dollars, isn't there a way to solve that problem? That's not... Suppose somebody's making $30,000 a year and he's got to pay a lawyer, and now all of a sudden, before you even hear the case,
Yeah.
he's out $2,000.
So most of the cases that I see, it depends on the hearing, and when you say 8 to 4, it usually doesn't happen. It's more like 8 to 10. I've sat in, first session ends about 10:30, and the judge comes in about 8:30. And usually, and this is from my experience, the judge will get to all the cases in that first session. So it's usually not the whole day. If there's a trial or something bigger, they schedule for a certain time, and you're in at that certain time. So I would assume, yes, there probably is a better way that the courts can work with lawyers about timing and whatnot. Or God forbid, the bar could make a rule that says you can't just charge on end,
And on that note, we have to end our show.
We're ending.
We're
I thought we
ending.
just started.
I know, it feels like
Part two.
Part two.
part 2 and 3. Thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you very
on the
much
show
for having me.
again.
I hope I was responsive.
You were
Oh, yes,
responsive.
you are.
Oh,
You're
no
always
question, you were
responsive to
responsive.
it. We want to thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the show, and I hope you'll be with us next time. Good night. Thank you.